Hi, I'm Keith Fenwick. I've got an interesting scene of a Welsh Gorge to paint for you, and I've used the tracing and the instructions out of my book Rivers and Streams to transfer the drawing onto the paper. The other thing I've done is I've used some masking fluid to put in the fast flowing river to preserve the white of the paper. And the first thing we've got to do is to put in the sky, and we're going to do what's called a wet in wet sky. So I'm using the sky and texture brush, and I'm going to wet it with a very pale yellow, just a bit of cadmium yellow, barely seen, just to wet the paper. This is what we're doing, is a wet in wet sky. Now I want a little bit of yellow down the bottom here, so I'm using a little bit of cadmium yellow just down the bottom here. And then into the cobalt blue, and we're going to put in the background sky. It's a large brush, so make sure there's no thick pieces of paint in. And all we're going to do is very simply put in a background. I'll explain why we're doing a simple sky in a moment. Now I've got to do this while it's wet, and I'm just working around the yellow. I want it just to fuse in nicely. Perhaps a little bit more blue in parts. I'm just having a wiggle look, and then we'll just use a larger brush with a very gentle touch just to spread the paper. I'm directing the brush strokes down to the land area. And that's all we have to do at this stage. We need to let it dry now. Now the important thing when you're doing a sky is you saw me put on a very light wash first of all. You must not let that get more than 1/3 dry before you put in your clouds. If you do, the paint, the second coat, can't soak in and you get what's called hard edges or cauliflowers. That's important. The accepted rules of watercolour painting is that you paint light to dark. But when you're doing trees, it's not natural because trees are dark on the inside and light on the outside. So I'm going to do them as nature. So I'm going to use the large sipper brush, and I'm having a mix of Payne's Grey and some sap green, and I'm going to stipple in for speed the dark underpainting. What I'm doing is I'm deciding how tall the trees are going to be. And I'll start shaping them in a moment. Now, although this is a large brush, I'm going to use the corner of the brush just to shape it. I don't want the paint too wet at this stage, so with the tissue I'm taking it off. I'm using the wet paint that I've already put on, and I'm just starting to shape the trees, make them look more natural. We don't just want round blobs. Now what I'm going to do now is use a wonder knife now, and I'm going to scratch in a little tree structure. You've got to do this while the paint is still wet, but not too wet. It should be about 1/3 dry. So what you do is have a little nick first of all and see whether it fills in. That's fine, it hasn't filled in. So let's put in a little bit of tree structure. That's sufficient at this stage. Now I'm going over to this side and do the same thing. So what we're going to do, I'm going to use my unique tree and foliage brushes, and we're going to put a range of colours on to make the trees look autumny. So here we go. I'm using the Derwent brush, one of the two unique brushes. So we'll start with a little bit of cadmium yellow. I'm working according to an old theatre expression. You design the set, which we've done. You're rearranging the elements, which we've done. We'll light it at the end. So what we'll do first of all is just put some colour on here, some groups of foliage. I'm not trying to paint individual leaves, but I'm trying to represent some colour on this foliage. This is still what I class as the underpainting. We'll just put a whole range of different colours in here. All we're doing is stippling. I'm just putting a range of yellows on. We'll put some cadmium orange on, different colours, to be reasonably happy with an impression of autumn. Bit of cadmium orange now. Just touching lightly. Now the paint mustn't be too wet, otherwise you just get a blob. And I want to show groups of foliage. Although we're not trying to paint individual leaves, that's more of an orangey colour. This is a group of trees and bushes, growing on top of this gorge. As a boy, I grew up playing in 200 acres of woodland. I like trees to look like trees and not lollipops. Put more raw sienna mixed in. And I'm going to put a bit of green in, a bit of sap green, but they'll not all be autumn colours. I want some greens in here as well. Now let's work on the other side now. Same procedure. Time consuming, but it's important. And that will suffice for the underpainting. What we have to do now is to dry that completely, and then we're going to light it. We're going to put the highlights on now. We're going to light it. So how do we do that? I want it to stay on the top. So I prefer to use a bit of acrylic white, titanium white, mixed with a traditional watercolour, and that will highlight the foliage and make it stay on the top. So I get a sharp impression of foliage. So again, I'm back to the same brush, the down water brush. So I want some nice lemon yellow with a little bit of white. And I'm going to work around here systematically. I want to highlight the edge here. Bit more yellow. I'm just going between the range of yellows and siennas. Touching very, very lightly with the brush just to deposit the effective foliage. Let's have some orange, again mixed with the white. Little orange there, a bit of orange over here. Let's highlight the tops where the light's hitting it. We'll have some yellow, I think. So a nice light coloured bush down here, look. That's nice, that's the colour I like. We'll have a nice light bush down here. Now let's have a look how we're doing. While I've got the paint on the brush, I'm going to the other side. All you've got to do is to learn where to stipple. That's the difficult thing when you're learning. Let's have a gauze bush or something in here, nice yellow gauze bush. Bit of white for the highlights. This is a personal thing. Each artist will do something different. I feel I need something in here. That's what makes painting different. But all the same, it'd be a boring world, wouldn't it? Right, let's have a look again. I want a light bit down there. I think I'll have a little bit of light up there. I can always put some in later. I never finish the painting off until I've got the whole lot put in. I want a bit of light here. The trees are one of the main features, so it's important that I get this foliage right. I think we'll leave that there at this stage. We're going to put a few saplings here. We're going to look through the gorge. So I'm just going to put a little bit of purple in here, just as a background. Wants to be quite wet. Just something atmospheric in here. To get recession, I want to look through the gorge. And then using a rigger, we'll put in a few saplings. Bit of Payne's grey, bit of burnt sienna. And we'll just paint in here. Just a few little branches and that coming through here, look. And there we are, that's that. Let's get these rocks in now. I'm using the sky and texture brush. I'm using a bit of cobalt blue. I'm just going to wet this down here, wet in wet, look. Just wet it in like that. Bit of raw sienna. Bit of burnt sienna. I'm switching to the 3/4 flat. I want some Payne's grey with a bit of risen crimson. I'm shaping the rocks a little bit like that. Bit more burnt sienna over this side. And then we'll get the knife working. All we do is hold your thumb on the edge of the blade like that, finger behind the toe, and we just move it just like you butter your bread in the morning. Easy as that. Here we go. So easy to do this. Paint should be about 1/3 dry. Let's put a few little nicks here and there. Around the bottom there we'll put some bigger stones in. Just putting in some rocks around the water's edge. back to the knife, just move the paint around. There we are, there's a representation of the cliffs.